I never thought of myself as a hero. I was just a regular guy, doing my job on the mining ship Vanguard, traveling through the dark and quiet stretches of the Outer Rim. We were the forgotten ones. No one cared about us. Just a crew of specialists sent to extract resources from barren moons that no one else wanted to bother with. There were no grand adventures, no battles against alien species, just the cold hum of the engines, the scent of recycled air, and the occasional glitch in the system. Our mission was always the same: dig deep, extract ore, and send it back to the central colonies. Simple. At least that's what I thought. I had just finished my shift when I received the message. It was from Captain Emery, the ship's leader, and it was marked as urgent. She wasn't a woman prone to dramatics, so when her words flashed across my terminal, a knot formed in my stomach. Prepare for extraction phase. Please report to the command deck immediately, it read. I knew what that meant. The drilling was about to start. It was routine for us, but this time something felt different. The tone of her message carried an undercurrent of tension, a slight urgency. I dismissed the feeling as just the usual pre-mission nerves, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I stood up from my station, stretching my legs, and walked to the command deck. The ship's corridors felt emptier than usual. Maybe it was because the crew was starting to settle into their tasks, but the silence in the halls made the atmosphere feel heavier than it should have been. The low hum of the engines resonated in the floor beneath my boots, a constant reminder that we were floating in the cold, indifferent vacuum of space. The walls were lined with old, flickering lights, barely enough to see by. I passed through the bridge door, and Captain Emery was already there, standing at the command panel with her back to me, looking out at the void through the large observation window. The lights of distant stars cast shadows across her face. "Captain," I asked, trying to hide the edge of concern in my voice. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting mine. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something off about the way she stood. Tense, like she was preparing for something. She didn't respond immediately, and for a moment it felt as if time itself had slowed down. "We've received some new data from the surface," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "It's not just ore down there. There's something else." I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" She turned back to the console and flicked a switch. The screen blinked to life, showing a grainy map of the surface of the moon we were about to mine. It looked like any other barren rock in the Outer Rim, but as the image zoomed in, I noticed something odd. The terrain didn't look natural. There were structures, large shapes beneath the surface, formations too symmetrical to be purely geological. My stomach churned, an unease gnawing at me. "Some kind of anomaly," she continued, her voice tight. "I don't know what it is, but it's there, and it's deep." My mind raced. "So, what's the plan?" Emery didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the monitor. "We're going in, but we need to be careful. Whatever this is, it's not something we've encountered before, and I don't want to risk anyone's life unless we have to." I nodded, trying to make sense of what she was saying. Something deep in the moon's crust was calling to us, and I didn't know if it was a warning or an invitation. But I knew one thing: this mission was about to become far more complicated than I ever imagined. And from that moment on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being drawn into something far bigger than a simple mining operation. Emery's voice broke through my thoughts. "Get ready. We leave in 30 minutes. And just like that, we were no longer just miners. We were explorers, whether we liked it or not. The moon, designated X-47, was an unremarkable lump of rock in the vast emptiness of space. It had been flagged on our maps as a perfect candidate for mining: no atmosphere, no indigenous life, just barren land with rich deposits of precious metals buried deep within its crust. It seemed like an easy job. We'd been tasked with harvesting ore and sending it back to the colonies, nothing more, nothing less. Or so we thought. The descent was smooth, the ship's engines humming in the background, their constant vibrations a comforting presence. As we entered the moon's weak gravitational field, the dark surface of X-47 grew larger in the viewports. I watched as the landscape passed by below, craggy, dull, and lifeless. A few scattered craters dotted the surface, the remnants of impacts long since forgotten. There was nothing remarkable about it. I had expected that. But something in the air felt different, It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it gnawed at me the deeper we went. The usual unease of entering an unknown environment seemed amplified this time. It wasn't just the mission that felt off, it was something in the very fabric of the ship. The hum of the engines seemed to vibrate a little louder. The metallic scent of recycled air felt a little more oppressive. I tried to shake it off. It was probably just the tension in the crew. Everyone knew we were about to begin the real work, and nerves had a way of making even the calmest of us twitchy. We reached our target coordinates, the point where our drill was supposed to punch through the surface. It was routine at this stage. But as I made my way to the operations room, I noticed a few things that were out of place. The usual calm chatter among the crew had been replaced by hushed voices and uncertain looks. The ship's AI system kept sending subtle alerts to the crew, warnings about interference in the readings. The instruments were beginning to show strange fluctuations, though no one could explain why. Something wasn't right, but none of us knew exactly what it was. Dr. Celia Harper, our geologist, was the first to voice what we were all beginning to feel. She had been staring at the console for a while, her brow furrowed, her face pale. "Captain," she called out, her voice tight with concern. "You need to see this." I turned to see the captain move toward Celia's station, and I followed. The data on the screen was alarming. The drill sensors were picking up unusual readings deep within the moon's crust, energy surges, shifts in the composition of the rock that didn't make sense. A pattern had formed, and it wasn't natural. It was as if the moon's core was alive. Celia's fingers danced across the console as she ran deeper scans. The results only seemed to make things worse. "We're not just dealing with rock here," Celia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something buried beneath the surface, something different. These readings, they're unlike anything I've seen before." Captain Emery studied the screen, her face unreadable. "What do you mean? Are you saying we've hit something? A cavern or a fault line?" Celia shook her head slowly, her expression haunted. "No, it's not a fault. There's something. Energy. Something moving." A shiver ran down my spine. I glanced at the other crew members. Brad, the chief engineer, looked uneasy, his fingers tapping restlessly on the console. I could see that everyone was trying to make sense of it, but there were no easy answers. Emery took a long breath, her gaze shifting from the screen to the rest of us. "I don't care if it's energy or a goddamn alien artifact. We're here to do a job." We pushed forward. Drill deeper. For a moment I thought I saw uncertainty flash in her eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. She was the captain, and her word was final. We were already committed, and no amount of strange readings was going to turn us back now. "Prepare for deeper penetration," Emery ordered, her voice steady. As the command was passed down the line, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were digging into something far bigger than a simple mining operation. Whatever was down there, it wasn't something we were prepared for, but we were going in anyway. The descent grew more intense as the drill powered through the surface of X-47, burrowing deeper into the moon's crust. The sound of the massive drill was a constant hum beneath us, a vibration that seemed to shake the entire ship, reverberating in the walls and the floor beneath our feet. I had been through this before. Mining operations were, for the most part, predictable. You drilled, you extracted, and you moved on. But this felt wrong. Every twist of the drill bit seemed to echo through the ship like a warning, the noise growing sharper, more insistent. We had passed through the top layers of rock, the initial soft terrain, and were now into the denser material below. But when the drill hit something hard, something unyielding, it stopped abruptly, sending a shockwave through the ship that rattled every loose object in the control room. My seat jerked forward, and I had to brace myself against the console to avoid falling. "Report," Captain Emery's voice cut through the sudden chaos. Brad, the chief engineer, was the first to respond, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he checked the ship's diagnostics. "We've hit a solid layer, Captain. Something's blocking the drill. It's not just rock. It's different." Celia leaned over his shoulder, eyes scanning the data on the screen. "I don't like this," she muttered, her voice thick with unease. "This isn't geological. This doesn't match anything we've seen before." "What does that mean?" I asked, trying to keep the edge of panic from creeping into my voice. Brad's face tightened, his expression darkening. "I think the drill's hit something artificial. A wall. Maybe. We're not dealing with a natural formation here. Celia pushed up her glasses, her eyes now wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Whatever's down there isn't just an object. It's a structure. And it's deep. Really deep. The air in the control room felt heavier as Captain Emery's face hardened. She straightened up, her jaw set. Keep drilling. We're not backing out now. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. We were already too deep to turn back. The drill had been designed to break through almost anything in its path, but whatever we had hit seemed to be resisting us. The sensors were showing odd readings, energy fluctuations that were growing stronger by the second. It was as if something down there was responding to our intrusion. Captain Celia said, her voice tight with tension. These energy readings, they're spiking. Whatever we're drilling into, it's alive. Alive, I repeated, my voice nearly a whisper. I couldn't wrap my head around it. A structure deep within the moon, and now Celia was suggesting it was somehow alive. My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying, but the implications were overwhelming. Emery crossed her arms, staring at the screens. Alive how? Like an organism? A weapon? Celia nodded slowly, her eyes still glued to the data. I don't know yet. But the readings are wrong. They shouldn't be happening. There's energy in there, massive energy. I'm not even sure what it is, but it's interacting with our drill, responding to it somehow. A long, uncomfortable silence stretched between us. We were all thinking the same thing. What the hell were we dealing with? Get the drill back in motion, Captain Emery ordered, her voice steely. We need to find out what's down there. We've come too far to pull out now. The decision was made, and with a hum of machinery, the drill continued its relentless journey into the unknown. But every turn of the bit, every creak of the ship, felt like we were disturbing something ancient and powerful. It was as if whatever lay beneath the surface was awakening, reacting to us. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I could hear the drill groaning under the pressure, and every so often I'd feel the ship lurch as the drill encountered resistance. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the resistance disappeared. The drill bit plunged forward, almost as though it had broken through some invisible barrier. The air seemed to grow colder. Something's wrong, Brad muttered, his voice low and filled with tension. And then, just as he spoke, the lights flickered. The entire ship shuddered as if it had been struck by an invisible force. And for the briefest moment, I thought I saw something move, something shadowed, something vast, shifting in the depths below. My breath caught in my throat. Something was down there. Something alive. The moment the drill broke through whatever barrier it had been fighting against, everything changed. The ship shuddered violently, like it had been struck by an unseen force. The lights flickered, dimming to a low, sickly glow before coming back to life. It wasn't just the ship's systems that reacted. There was a palpable shift in the air, as if the very atmosphere of the moon was pressing in on us. The hum of the engines became a low, uncomfortable thrum that resonated through my bones. My skin prickled, every sense on high alert. Everyone stay sharp, Captain Emery's voice cut through the tension, calm but firm. Prepare for possible contact with whatever's down there. It was as if the ship itself was holding its breath. We all gathered around the command center, eyes fixed on the displays. The monitors showed no signs of structural damage to the ship, but the readings were unlike anything we had encountered before. The sensors, which had been picking up strange fluctuations, now showed rapid changes in temperature, energy surges, and an increasing concentration of something dense beneath the surface. It wasn't just the moon's interior that had changed, it was as though the very environment had shifted, responding to the presence of the drill. Celia was glued to her station, frantically scanning the data, her fingers dancing across the touchpad as if trying to decipher a code. I don't get it, she muttered, her voice strained. The core shouldn't be like this. These readings. It's as if the entire structure is reactive aware. It's like we're disturbing something that's been dormant for ages. I looked at the screen beside her, trying to make sense of the readings. There was a spike in what appeared to be an electromagnetic field, and the strange energy patterns were getting stronger. But none of it made sense. How could a structure buried deep within a moon react to our drilling? What kind of force was down there? Suddenly, the ship's AI pinged a warning. An urgent red alert flashing across all our terminals. Unusual activity detected. A large object was moving beneath us. A rapid shift in mass and energy. Report, Emery barked, her eyes narrowing. Brad, who had been monitoring the drill's status, looked up sharply, his face paling. The drill's moving on its own, he said, his voice tight. The systems aren't responding. It's being pulled deeper. The ship lurched again, this time more violently than before. My stomach dropped, and I gripped the edge of my console to steady myself. The drill had clearly broken through to something far larger than we had anticipated, but now it seemed to be acting as if it were being pulled down by some invisible force, its descent rapid and uncontrolled. Celia's voice broke through the panic. It's reacting to us. The drill is responding to something below. I think it's a signal. Whatever is down there, it's calling to the drill. I swallowed hard. Calling to the drill? What does that mean? She turned to me, her face pale, her hands trembling. It's alive. I've never seen anything like this before. The energy patterns, they're almost like communication. Whatever is down there, it's trying to make contact. My mind raced, unable to fully grasp what she was saying. Alive? Trying to communicate? Was this some kind of ancient technology? Or worse, a weapon? It didn't make sense. And yet, the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like we weren't just disturbing a natural resource. We were intruding on something that had been hidden. Something that had waited in the depths of this dead moon for a reason. Then, just as suddenly as the ship had lurched, everything went still. The hum of the drill stopped. The vibrations that had rattled the entire ship ceased, and the monitors fell silent. The absence of noise was suffocating. For a moment I thought it was over, that whatever had been pulling us deeper had let go. But then, from below, came a sound. Low, resonant, almost like a growl, not from the ship but from beneath it, vibrating through the very rock. It was a sound so deep, so ancient, that it seemed to rattle my bones. And it was only then that I realized whatever had been hidden in the depths wasn't just a structure or a machine, it was alive. And now, it knew we were here. The silence that followed was deafening. And in that silence, I knew something had changed. We had awoken something, and it wasn't happy about it. The silence that followed the growl seemed to stretch on forever. Time itself felt suspended as we waited for the next sound, the next sign, anything to confirm what was happening. My breath felt shallow, caught in my throat. The entire ship had gone still, as if holding its collective breath. I could feel the tension in the air like a physical weight pressing against my chest. Everyone in the control room was frozen, eyes wide, hands hovering over controls that no longer seemed to matter. Then, as though in response to the eerie quiet, the ship lurched once more, this time with far more force than before. The walls groaned under the strain, and I could hear the whine of metal stretching, struggling to hold everything together. The lights flickered again, this time accompanied by a sudden power surge that sent the monitors into chaos. The data was erratic blips of strange signals, deep vibrations, irregular energy spikes, all pointing to one thing: we had unwittingly triggered something beneath the surface. The AI system's voice crackled to life, its monotone voice sounding panicked for the first time. Warning: unstable energy field detected. Power fluctuations. Before it could finish, another growl reverberated through the ship. Deeper this time, a rumble that made the very floor beneath me vibrate. It wasn't just sound, it was an energy, a pulse, like a heartbeat coming from the depths of the moon. God, what the hell is that? Brad whispered, his face pale, his hands gripping the console. We need to pull back, Celia said, her voice trembling. She looked at Captain Emery, her expression desperate. Whatever this is, it's not something we can control. We have no idea what we're dealing with. But Emery was already moving, her face set in grim determination. She was the captain. She had a job to do. Not yet. We're not retreating. We need to figure out what we've awakened down there. I won't run from this. Not until we know what it is. Celia didn't respond, but I could see the fear in her eyes, fear that mirrored my own. Whatever was beneath the surface of X-47 wasn't just an unknown, it was a force. And it was aware of us now. The drill continued its descent, the tension between it and the ship palpable. It was no longer just a machine digging into rock. It had become a conduit, pulling us deeper into the moon's mysterious depths. Each inch felt like a violation, as if the moon itself was rejecting us, fighting back. "Captain," I said, my voice shaky, "we can't keep drilling. If we go any deeper, we don't know what we'll unleash. Whatever that thing is down there, it's responding to the drill. We have to stop." Emery didn't look up from the console, her fingers moving with practiced precision. "We don't know what it is yet. If we stop now, we may never know." I looked at the others. Everyone was tense, eyes darting to the shaking walls, the flickering lights, and the low, constant rumble from below. Celia was watching the readings with growing concern, and Brad was staring at his controls, his face tight with fear. The ship felt alive with uncertainty, and the weight of our situation pressed down on us all. Then, as though in direct response to our defiance, the growl came again. Louder. Closer. It was a terrible sound, a deep, guttural vibration that seemed to permeate the air itself. I felt it in my chest, the unmistakable sensation of a force pushing back, pulling at the ship. "Captain, we can't ignore this any longer," I shouted. "It's too dangerous. We need to retreat. Now." But Emery didn't respond. She kept her eyes fixed on the monitors, her fingers moving with urgency. I could feel the fear in her posture, the way her shoulders were tense, but she wasn't ready to give up, not yet. I glanced at the others. They were looking at her, then at me, the uncertainty spreading among the crew. We all knew what we had to do, but none of us were willing to say it aloud. The lights flickered again, and this time they went out completely. The ship plunged into darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for the emergency light controls, trying to bring some semblance of order to the chaos. The low rumble below us intensified, and the walls groaned as if they were about to buckle under the strain. The ship seemed to be in a state of distress, shuddering with every passing moment. "We need to go now," I said. Louder this time, my voice commanding, though I could hear the fear creeping in. "Get us out of here, Captain." Emery finally turned to face me, her eyes locked on mine. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt, a crack in her resolve. But then she took a deep breath, standing tall, her decision made. "All right," she said quietly, her voice steady. "Get us out. Now." And with that, the ship's engines roared to life, the acceleration throwing us back as we shot away from the surface of X-47, the dark moon receding in the distance. But even as we fled, I knew we hadn't escaped. Whatever was down there, whatever had been waiting for us in the depths, wasn't finished with us yet. The hunt had only just begun. The ship lurched as the engines powered up, but despite the speed, the vibrations from the depths of X-47 seemed to follow us, reverberating through the hull like a lingering echo. The low, guttural growl had faded, but the sense of dread hadn't. We weren't safe. I could feel it in the air, the weight of something watching us, waiting for us to make the next move. I wasn't the only one who felt it. The crew was tense, their eyes darting between the monitors, the walls, each other. Everyone knew we had made a mistake, but none of us were sure how deep we'd gotten into it. We had moved clear of the moon's surface, the dark orb of X-47 shrinking rapidly behind us. But the unease didn't dissipate. I watched the view screen as the moon's craggy surface drifted farther away, trying to convince myself that we were safe. But every instinct told me that this wasn't over. We had triggered something ancient and dangerous. "Status report," Captain Emery's voice broke the silence, cold and steady, though there was a barely detectable edge of worry creeping in. Brad, the chief engineer, was hunched over his console, his face pale and drawn. "We're clear of the moon's gravity, Captain, but the systems are still unstable. The power flux from below us is still showing on the scans. It's like whatever it is we disturbed is still reaching out." Celia, our geologist, was silent, her fingers nervously tapping against the console in front of her. I glanced at her and saw the same fear I felt mirrored in her eyes. She had been the first to warn us, and now her expression said it all. What we had uncovered wasn't just a relic. It was alive, aware, and not finished with us. "How far are we from the moon?" Emery asked, her voice calm but her posture rigid, as though bracing herself for something she already knew was coming. "We're at a safe distance," Brad replied, his voice tight. But that's not what worries me. It's the interference from the surface. The energy readings have shifted. They're becoming more intense, almost as if something is trying to. He cut himself off as a warning alarm blared across the bridge. Celia swiveled toward the console, her fingers flying over the controls, trying to stabilize the readings. "It's coming from the moon," she said, her voice low and strained. "We're being followed." A wave of cold dread washed over me. "What do you mean?" "It's impossible. We're already out of range." "I don't think you understand," Celia said, her voice trembling now. "We've triggered something powerful. And it's not letting go. The energy signature. It's like a pulse, a signal, and it's following us." Emery's face hardened. "Can we shake it? Can we outrun it?" Brad's voice was grim. "I don't think it works like that. We're dealing with something we don't understand. Whatever we've disturbed down there, it's not just a relic. It's alive, and it's aware of us." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Whatever had been dormant for eons beneath X-47 wasn't just a passive structure waiting to be discovered. It had been waiting for us. And now it was coming after us. "Do you think it's a weapon?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Could be," Brad muttered. "But it's not like any weapon I've ever seen. This feels different, like it's connected to the very fabric of the moon itself." The tension in the room was unbearable. The soft hum of the engines, the flickering of the lights, the constant warnings from the AI system, it all felt like we were on the brink of something catastrophic. And yet, Emery didn't falter. "Prepare for evasive maneuver," she ordered, her tone unyielding. "We'll need to put as much distance between us and that moon as we can. Set course for the nearest station, get us out of this system." The crew scrambled, fingers flying over the controls, the sound of engines humming louder as the ship veered away from X-47. But even as we accelerated into the void, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already too late. Whatever force was down there had already marked us, and no amount of speed or maneuvering would erase that. I glanced at the view screen again, watching as the moon's surface slowly shrank into the darkness of space. But beneath that, a deeper darkness seemed to pulse, a cold, unknowable presence that I could feel even now, out of range. It was as if the moon itself had become a living thing, and we had disturbed it. The growl, that deep, resonant sound from the depths of X-47, echoed in my mind, louder now than it had been in the moments before we had left the moon behind. And though we were moving farther from its surface, I knew that it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We had opened a door, and whatever had been waiting for us was not about to let it close. The ship was silent as we moved further from the dark moon of X-47, but the tension among the crew was palpable, thickening the air. I sat in the corner of the control room, staring at the view screen, watching as the cold expanse of space stretched before us. There was nothing on the display, nothing visible. But I could feel it, that gnawing sensation at the back of my mind, the awareness that something was out there, something ancient and watching. We weren't alone, not anymore. "We should have turned back," Brad muttered, his voice heavy with regret. "We never should have drilled. We were blind." Celia didn't respond, her face drawn as she continued to monitor the readings on her screen. The strange energy pulses from X-47 had not stopped. They were faint now, but still persistent, creeping into our systems, interfering with our technology. The ship's sensors were in disarray, constantly flickering between normal and erratic readings. Something beneath the surface of that moon was still reaching out, probing, trying to find us. And we were helpless against it. I could hear Emery moving behind me, her boots clicking on the metal floor as she paced. She had been quiet for a long time, her thoughts clearly weighing on her. But she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. We all knew the truth. We had unleashed something, and no amount of distance or speed could erase that fact. Captain Celia said, breaking the silence, her voice tight with growing anxiety. "The readings are getting worse. We're being pulled back in. Whatever's down there, it's not done with us." Emery's eyes hardened, her posture as rigid as steel. She turned toward the view screen, scanning the emptiness of space as though expecting to see something looming just beyond the reach of the stars. "What do you mean?" "Pulled back in?" she asked, though the disbelief in her voice was growing thinner by the second. It's like a tractor beam, Celia replied, her hands trembling as she tapped the controls. We've triggered something, some kind of field. And it's pulling us back toward X-47. The energy signature, it's increasing. It's not just a reaction to our drilling anymore. It's a conscious force. I swallowed hard, a cold shiver running through me. The words were too much. A conscious force. It didn't sound like anything we'd ever encountered. The idea of a living, thinking entity buried beneath the surface of a desolate moon, controlling us from the shadows, it felt like something out of a nightmare. We need to leave the system, Brad said, his voice rising. We need to get out of here now. Whatever this is, it's not going to stop. We can't fight it. Emery's expression remained unchanged. We're not running, she replied, her voice low but commanding. Not yet. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the flicker of fear beneath her calm exterior. She wasn't just keeping us on course, she was fighting against a gnawing panic, the same fear that had taken root in all of us. Whatever was down there, it wasn't just reacting to our presence, it was hunting us. We don't have time, I said, my voice trembling. We're already too close. I glanced at the view screen again, half expecting to see some kind of shape moving in the darkness, something massive coming toward us. But the stars were still distant, cold, and empty. The moon, X-47, was a distant memory. And yet, I could feel it like a weight pressing against my chest, as though the void itself had a presence. Celia gasped, her hands flying to the controls. The ship, it's shifting. It's not us. It's being manipulated. The ship groaned, the metal of its hull creaking under pressure, as if it were being pulled in a direction it wasn't meant to go. The lights flickered again, dimming for a moment before snapping back to full intensity. Brace for impact, Emery said suddenly, her voice commanding. But before anyone could react, the ship lurched violently, the sudden force sending everyone stumbling against their seats. The gravitational pull was now unmistakable. We weren't just losing control, we were being dragged back toward X-47, as if some invisible hand was reeling us in. I gripped the edge of my console, my heart racing. I could hear the sounds of the hull stretching under the immense strain. The ship's systems were going haywire, alarms blaring as they tried to compensate for the unnatural force pulling us back. All systems are failing, Brad said, his voice panicked. We're losing power. We can't fight it. Shut everything down, Emery barked, her voice low and sharp. We need to sever the connection. Now. But it was too late. The power was draining too fast, and the interference from below was too strong. I could feel the force pulling at me, an undeniable sensation that we were at the mercy of something far greater than ourselves. And I knew then, with a cold certainty, that we had awakened something that was never meant to be disturbed. We weren't leaving X-47. Not alive, at least. The hunt had begun, and we were its prey.